The bang. Well, good morning and welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Michael Chinnew-Horsburgh. I'm Chairman of the Norfolk Records Committee. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting and quickly go over some general housekeeping as usual. This meeting is being held in person at County Hall and is also being streamed live on the County Council's YouTube channel. A fire alarm test is not expected during the meeting, but if the alarm sounds, we must evacuate to County Hall. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit and meet at the muster point located on the main car park. Apologies for absent. Len, can you give me your apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillor Sue Sands, Dr. G. Alan Metters and Dr. Victor Morgan. Thank you.
Minutes. To approve the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, 24th of October 25. Can we approve the meeting, the minutes, please? Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Today I'm going to welcome Councillor Fabian Eagle. He is a Cabinet Member for Economic Growth, and he's with us today in support of the Hallmarks project, which we will deal with later. But I would like to introduce Jonathan Draper, Katie Swift, and Andrew Tullett from the Norfolk Record Office, as they will be presenting the Hallmarks report later in the day. In this meeting, rather, not this afternoon. Members to declare any interest. Well, I do. I'm, yes. Well, I've got to welcome Martin. Well, first of all, Martin, welcome to you. Yes. I was going to ask you how you pronounce your name. I didn't want to get it wrong, so...
Schmira, but I've heard every iteration of it, so I'm not offended if you get it wrong however many times.
I'll be Martin today.
Let's stick with Martin, yes, absolutely.
That sounds good. Members declare any interest. Well, yes, that's me. I'm one of the trustees of the Norfolk Record Office charity. Any other interests? No? Well, moving on. I have to wear these specs these days. Finance and risk report. Well, I'm going to ask Gary to, as finance goes over my head, to introduce you to this, introduce this report, please.
So, good morning, everyone. So this is the, as the Chair said, finance and risk reports. It's the usual report which comes to the committee, saying where we are on our budget for this year. If we turn to page 11, this is showing our current financial position. And this report shows an overspend of £1,297. But I've spent a lot of time doing budget work this week, and I think we're showing about a saving of £9 at the moment. So it should be well balanced at the end of the year, is the plan. Dr. Metters isn't here, because at the last meeting he raised the fact that you don't know what the brackets mean. He did know. But yeah, so I've added something explaining that the brackets mean minus. Page 7 is looking at our reserves, and there has been some spend on reserves this year. We have been preparing for getting lots of our storing materials ready, and we needed boxes and box boards, so I used that basically. A few other little bits. It's not reported in here, but it is reported to Cabinet, and we'll be going to full council on the 17th of February about next year's budget. And the Record Office next year is going to be taking another 25,000 from reserves as a one-off saving. So it comes out 1 year and goes back in the next year. So it shouldn't have any impact on the service, which is good to report. But that's not finalised until 17th of February. The risk register. It's been reviewed again, and there's some updates. Page 15 is Archive Service Accreditation, and this is now lots of zeros because we have secured the archive service accreditation, so this will be removed from the risk register for the next meeting. It will come back on in 2 years' time when we have to do a full accreditation review, but I'm pleased to say that one's met. Collection storage, this is really the unexpected coming in where we have a sudden large accession that takes up lots of our expansion space. I'm sort of pleased to report we haven't, even though it's always good when something comes in unexpectedly. So, you know, we're on target with that. Yeah, then collection storage space after. I thought that was a hand, Carol. Sorry. No, it's just. Collection storage space. Yeah, I mean, there is a hand from Robert.
In terms of storage space, digital storage, capacity for that is presumably vested with the County Council's computing department, and presumably there are no problems other than LGR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Norfolk County Council would rely on their infrastructure and their backup regimes and all of the security they have. I went to a presentation by Jeff Connell, the Director of Digital, the other week, and he was explaining all the things Norfolk County Council are doing, which I was quite pleased to hear. So I did...
No, thanks, Gary. Sorry, I didn't realise. I thought we were going to let you finish. There are points to make about the risk areas, but I just want to roll back to where we were looking at the finances just there. Sorry, I'm just page 11, table 6.1, where you've got the forecast underspend in salary, and you've got a description above it, and he says the unwinding of staff capitalisation. Can you just kind of expand on that for the committee? And then a follow-up question is about this move of reserves over a period and sort of budget setting. I thought the budget, I missed the last meeting due to half-term and childcare, but you know, I thought the budget setting came to this committee. I thought you brought that here before it, you know, and laid out how you were setting out the budget before it goes to cabinet. So could you just explain that capitalisation a bit more and talk about, give us assurance around that move in reserves and explain about how we get oversight of the budget setting here? Thank you.
So the reserves position is we have spent some money this year, as I explained, with some materials we need for the strong room. We've got a reserve for the strong room project, so that was appropriate. It's also involved things like I can't remember the exact lines. Most of it was just for boxes of materials, but we've also employed consultants to do environmental assessments to see how passive we can go in the space. Next year, the proposals are, which is for a one-off saving of £25,000, which comes from reserves. In terms of process, it doesn't usually come to this meeting. Yeah. I mean, members, I've raised it for your information, so you know, but the actual, because all of our budgets, apart from the income we generate, comes from Norfolk County Council. So it's...
No, I just remember a time where you're looking at making budget savings in the past, which was related to the reduction in the public service, you know, access for public, and so if that was coming in the past as a part of a formal report, that seemed to me to indicate that we were looking at your budget rationale and commenting on it, but that didn't seem to happen this year. So I think you can explain how I've misunderstood.
Yeah, in the past, it's because it has a service impact. Whereas this year, coming up, it will not have a service impact. So I was consulting with the committee because we were changing opening hours and moving those, so it's really appropriate to come to this committee.
Oh, well, thank you for that explanation. I think we would actually find it interesting to whether or not it has a service impact is to actually see the budget, because I think we can provide comment about that and also provide comment about how the use of reserves is being implemented, or whether or not, you know, we feel that the use of reserves is prudent, and I think we do have oversight over that. So, Chair, I would like to suggest that in the future, whether or not it has a service impact, that the budget still comes to us So are you happy to do that, Gary?
I'll speak to our finance business partner.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. But we can ask for it if we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it might be some points. But so that final point on is that staff capitalisation. Could you just expand upon that, please? Thank you.
So staff capitalisation, when it started, I think it started in 2020, 2021. There were severe pressures on the budget. We had projects running, in effect, which could be capitalised. And I managed to stretch that out for 4 years rather than 3. And that supported the retention of staff so we could carry on with that work. Obviously, there's been lots of work going on in Norfolk County Council capital budgets, trying to reduce them over the last few years. Obviously, that was a bit of a cliff edge for us if that just disappeared, because that would have a huge impact on the service. So I was very pleased to see that actually, it went back into revenue, which most of that money went back into the staff line on salary, which actually explains why it's got this underspend on it. Where in effect, me balancing my budget this year is actually using that £32,000, which originally went into staff, to use in other budgets. The forthcoming budget will not have that underspend against staff because it's got that money accounted for elsewhere.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Just while we're on that page, I think page 11, I've got some questions about LGR, but we'll come on to those. So, Gary, just noticing that in terms of income, that grants make up about 40% of that, so external grants. And just wondering whether, given that's notoriously unpredictable, is there a danger around that sort of reliance on that high percentage? And also, is there an increasing sort of demand on staff to be writing those applications and taking themselves away from the services they're trying to deliver?
Answer to the second question is definitely yes, but that's part of what we've been doing for a long time. So Jonathan, who sat next to me, I did a staff reorganisation quite a long time ago now, where what's your official job title? Your development and partnership and development manager. That's it. I could have read it. And that was part of the structure, recognising that actually we needed the resource to go after this, so that we could get grants and we could support that service. So it's an ongoing thing, really. And yes, there is a risk there. Obviously, we have a £250,000 from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which has been granted to us. And there are other grants which come in during the course of the year, but it is a cycle and there is a risk against them. Yeah. One of the impacts which we will feel is that when the 30-year rule was changed under the Public Records Act to a 20-year rule, during the period of 10 years when that was in effect, each year when we had public records transferred to us, which came in early, we calculated the volume of those, sent the figures to the National Archives, and they provided a grant based on the volume. That was very variable. I think the maximum we had was about 28,000. I'm not sure if that's the exact figure. I think this year we had about 11. Unfortunately, that has now stopped. So potentially that's another risk as well. Impact, yeah. So part of my budget management process throughout the year is always to be cynical about our income levels. So it's about managing it so that the risk is accounted for within our spend throughout the year. Until I feel confident, then we can get a few of the things we really need. Yeah. Shall I carry on with the risk?
Yes, I was saying. I believe.
Thank you, Chairman, and yes, also good morning. You mentioned local government reform, and hands went up. When I looked at the risks that you've got, and by the way, I'm very pleased to report that my council has finally got a separate risk on its risk register for local government reform. But when I was looking at your storage space,
that talks about only got sufficient space for 18 months. And then it was mentioned local government reform. And then I was looking for the risk to, which I think Ben mentioned, about the data and the impact of that on your records. And I couldn't see a separate risk of what the data that would come or the effect of, because if you've only got 18 months worth of storage in the current, at this stage up until 2027, what will you have enough space for the data after 2027, which is when things are going to start rapidly happening? And what I was wanting to know is, would you consider having a separate risk on this register just for local government reform and the impact that it's going to have on the Records Office and on the data that's going to be coming across through local government reform?
On page 22, it mentions the digital as part of the local government risk on there. Does it need to be, do you think it needs to be something stronger relating to digital?
Absolutely, because the question is there, it's out there, and it affects both your physical storage and your computer storage, or the capacity or capability of being able to store a massive influx of records.
Yeah. So, do you want to come in before I speak? Yeah. Yeah. We don't know how much digital is going to come in, but I think this could be the first event where huge amounts of digital do need preserving. We have flexibility because of the NCC infrastructure and our storage. So there may be a question of cost at a later stage. There's also a question of skills. But at the moment, I consider it a records risk coming from local government reorganisation, physical analogue records. Digital records, it's a higher risk. I'm not so much concerned about space. I'm concerned about formats and maintaining authenticity and the way those transfers take place.
Which in themselves is a significant risk.
So I can separate them out if you like. That's not a problem.
Well,
yeah.
Gary, before we continue, I think we have another question from both Ben and Saul, not the other way around.
I'm going to jump in first. So, I appreciate the report. And so, obviously that we've got this red rating here for LGR, and that's absolutely appropriate. Soon in March, we're going to find out the government's minded to decision, and that will confirm whether or not it's going to be 1, 2 or 3 unitaries. We're also going to find out, if it is a 1 unitary, whether or not it's going to be a continuing council or a new council. And there's quite a distinct difference even in that outcome, because a continuing council would of 1 unitary would mean that there would be a fairly seamless process here at this building with this organisation, or one would assume, so, okay, being the county-wide organisation. However, you've got your highlighted risk of LGR. I think it's important that when we come back to the next meeting that we have either a report or this particular document brought back which is updated, that takes into account the minded to. Because if we're in a situation where we're in a 3 unitary, we don't know if this building will be sold or used, what the future of the Records Office. So you've got this risk about absorbing the other district's records, but we have at the moment no highlighted risk of the complete dissolvement of this council and the removal of this building from the stock and from the property ownership, because if it becomes a unitary for Norwich, that council and those leaders will decide what buildings they want to use, what assets they want to keep, where they want to base their council. Now, I know this is all very early, but this process will move very quickly okay, and this council will be vested in just over 2 years' time, which is not giving you a lot of time. So I think it's really important that when we have the minded to, that we come back and get some assurance around the actual physical future of the records office. So if Gary has a response, but I think that we should have an update at that time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that minded to decision is the key thing. Because it's at the moment, I think lots of officers are in a sort of state, well, we want to be doing, but we want to put our resources and our time where it's going to be most effective. And that minded to decision, I think things are going to get very, very busy when we know that. I mean, there are discussions going on all the time about possible impact. I was at a manager's team meeting where there's things about, discussing things like staff morale, because the impact that the indecision is having has an impact on staff mental well-being. And then when the decision is made, so even having discussions about how we can cover that. But the other risk, well, a big risk you highlight, is that governance risk, if you like, the organisational risk. Norfolk Record Office is a county-wide service at the moment, and if there are 2 or 3 local authorities, there is that risk. I mean, the committee voted unanimously that it should stay together as a county-wide service, and I think that's where this committee does have a, that significant impact, because I was very pleased to see all hands went up in support of it. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to assess the risk. I'm not actually in control of what happens in LGR. But common sense view would be that actually to separate the Norfolk Record Office into, say, 2 record offices would have a capital cost of, £15 million, top of that in addition. So just the financial side of it, which doesn't always win out, would have that impact as well. But it is a risk, you're right.
Time we next meet, I think I would like this to be a discussion point, because we will have the minded to. I'll just reiterate, my fear is actually about the physical estate, that if it's a 3 unitary and the new unitary for Greater Norwich is not interested in this building site, and it's their prerogative to decide that, that leadership, it would be very interesting to, it would be very easy for people to just forget the records office is there and it's a specialised building, you know what I mean? So I do think it should be a discussion.
Interesting, and I agree with all of that. And I think given that, and just going back to a previous point before, Ben, around that digital risk, and maybe separating that out from the LGR risk as it is at the moment, I think I would support that. I think given that, I think you would say, Gary, and agree that born digital records will increase. There's no doubt about that. So, do we have the infrastructure that is sufficient to cope with the scale of that we expect? And also things, the Hallmarks project itself is relying on NRO sort of digital infrastructure and stuff, and that's under pressure. I think absolutely would support that.
Which is, what's it called? Developed by NASA. I'm looking to John. OAIS, yeah, which is the Archive Information System, yeah. So we've got that, but it takes time to process these records in the same ways. Lots of my risk about local government is my thought about, I'm confident now that we should be okay on space. I mean, there are still risks associated with our space and expanding storage. But if we get lots of digital and analogue records coming in time to do those properly. Early in my career, I spent a lot of time in a local authority clearing a local government reorganisation. I think I'm pretty much at the end. Major to report on any of the other risks. We have, on page 20, we've got collection access data, which we've talked about before, but of course you'll be hearing about the Hallmarks project very soon, which will be adding enormously to the data which we have available for people to use. Staff skills. Yeah, we've always, staff skills capacity really. I mean, that is always an issue. Part of my budget, I want to manage the budget next year, so we've got a bit of slack. But one of the things which has helped a little bit is we've been taking on work placements from City College, where people have come into us for a few months and learning, office skills and helping us with digitisation, which actually has had a positive impact as well. And then my final risk was about local government reorganisation, but I think we've probably exhausted that. Well, for the time being, we've exhausted that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. So, no, we've thoroughly examined the item, as we should and rightfully do, on behalf of the Norfolk citizens. So I'd actually just like to make a proposal to committee now, and my proposal is that when the budget setting is being taking place in the next cycle, that we see that in advance so we can provide comment. So I'm proposing that that happens for the next committee. I'll also make a second proposal around that we have this as the LGR as a sort of standing item for the next committee. So those are going to be my two proposals. So my first proposal to committee, and I'll need a seconder if committee are minded to, that would be that when the next budget setting process is happening, whether or not it is having a service effect or not, that we are privy to it so we can pass comment and have it as an item agenda. So that's my proposal, Chair. Do I have a seconder for it? I do have a seconder, Chair. Yep. Okay, that's good. And the second proposal, Chair, is to have it on the agenda at the LGR, and so we can discuss the Minded to event at the next meeting. I'm getting nods. So, are you happy to just put that on, or do we need to vote on that?
I'm happy to put it on. I mean, the next meeting's April, isn't it, I think? Sorry?
Yeah.
It's April,
so we'll know.
The only caveat to that is because of the process of committee report approval, when I'm writing the report, we might not have the Minded to decision. So I think it's better to make sure it's on the agenda as soon as we have the Minded to decision, because until we have the Minded to decision, I think you're writing 3 reports on different scenarios.
No, it's going to be late March. So I think that's. When did we say the meeting was? Okay, and agendas are a week before. So hopefully you've got,
hopefully
you've got a month to just put, because it's an agenda item for discussion, isn't it? So it's us to discuss it, but it's not much of a report. Maybe there's recommendations around the risk register or other things from.
I think, Saul, you have a point to make.
Well, I was just going to follow that up actually and say, yes, I would like to propose, if that's all right, with you, Gary. I don't know whether we need to for the risk register, but just to separate that digital risk out into its own risk under LGR. So can I propose that also is then built into the risk register as a separate risk, please?
Yeah, that's not a problem, and I don't think you need to vote, because I can take note of what you've said and act accordingly. Yeah,
fantastic.
Well, are there any further questions for Gary? No? Gosh, yes. Well, thank you very much. Well, the recommendations and action required. We are asked to consider and comment on forecast position of the revenue budget, reserves and provisions, and management of risk for 2025 to 2026. Are you happy with those? Excellent, thank you very much. Well, moving for me quickly on to the next item, which is much more interesting. It's a service update on Hall. Now, what page are we on? They're going to be on page 23. Yes, I find this one more interesting than the last topic. Report title is Hallmarks, the long shadow of Norfolk's lost country houses. And I literally live opposite one, just yards. So I'm going to ask for the service update, Jonathan Draper, Katie Swift, and Andrew Tullett to introduce this report.
I'll just do a short introduction.
Oh, thank you, yes.
So this is a strange meeting for me because I don't have to talk all the way through it. So I'm going to hand over very shortly. But really, I want to take this opportunity to thank certain people. I mean, I think, first of all, I want to thank Councillor Eagle and Councillor James, who came to me and said, wouldn't it be a good idea to do a project on Norfolk's lost country houses? And really, that kick-started it off. Thanks to Jonathan Draper, who has done sterling work to put the application and the project together and get the money, which is very, very important. Yeah. And then to the team, see Katie and Andrew here, who've been 3 months now and have made a great fist of starting it, you know. Well, I'm not going to steal Katie's thunder and Jonathan's thunder by saying what's coming next, but we're in a really good position with the project. I'm very pleased. So it's over to you.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm going to start with a bit of context, the origins of the project. Gary had his meeting with Councillor James and Councillor Eagle and said, lost country houses, what do you think? And I have to say, Gary came up with the title. I won't take credit for that. But initial thoughts were some sort of wellbeing project, a bit like Change Minds, but using lost country houses as the theme. But then it dawned on me that we could make it a bit more than that. So noting that this sort of tied in with other documents and other things that we were doing. So I was noting that tithe maps, which were produced around the 1840s, they're an important resource for identifying lost country houses. They were sort of at their peak just before the 1840s, so that was a good snapshot of where they were and how big they were. So for those that don't know, the tithe maps were produced to turn tithes, 10% of your output, into a monetary payment. And it was a comprehensive survey that covered most of the county, and they produced maps and schedules that goes with the maps that record land ownership, who occupied it, cultivation, information about the plot would have a name that could indicate what was there. And it's probably our go-to source. If anyone comes in and wants to do a history of house or family history, it's often the tithe map we go for first because we know we've got one, and we know what information is on there. And the beauty of tithe maps is they were done very close to 1841, which was the date of the first census. So if people are tracing their history of their family, they can find out where they lived, which is quite rare within the documents. And they cover, as I say, most of the county. About 20 years ago, we Cultural Services IT section, which no longer exists, did a project, Norfolk Historic Map Explorer, or eMap Explorer. I don't know if anyone has used that site, but it had different mapping layers. It's old, it's falling down, and there's always been things that I wanted to do to it, and this project was a good opportunity to do that. So the picture that you can see, it was just a rudimentary thing that we did for the Norfolk show 2024. So that shows you how long this has been in preparation. But it highlights the power of tithe maps, really. So we had an apportionment, which is the schedule, and people would look up, they would find a plot on the map, a numbered plot, they would look in the apportionment, find out who owned it, and then they would put a coloured dot on the map to indicate the land holding. And the map that you can see was Barbara, because part of the Norfolk Showground is on Barbara, in Barbara. And there's two country houses, lost country houses, Cossey is blue, I think, on that map. Can't quite see. And Barbara had a lost country house as well. But this was just a rudimentary way of showing what tithe maps can do. You can see things on the ground that you, in a sort of a geographical way that you can't any other way. And that's my son who was doing it. So it highlights the importance of tithe maps, really. The project developed into one that used Norfolk's lost country houses and their estates as an overall theme to promote the Record Office's holdings, to improve access to them by developing the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer and getting apportionments transcribed, and to provide learning on how to use the Council's heritage collections to understand our local area. And the wonderful thing about this project is that it relates to the whole county. You'll see a map in a moment that has all the lost country houses plotted on it, and they're all over. In applying to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, I wanted to match the Heritage Fund's investment principles with many of the NRO's strategic aims. And so, as Katie and Andrew will talk about the project, a lot of the outputs match these. So ensuring archives are accessible now and in the future, enabling people to discover information from archives, enabling new and wider audiences to benefit from the use of archives, and providing a sustainable service. And so that's some of the origins of the project. So I'll hand over to Katie now, who will explain in more detail what it hopes to do.
I'm not Katie, but I'm going to speak next. So I'm Andrew, the Archive Project Officer for Hallmarks, and I'm going to set some context about the Lost Halls, and I'll talk more about specifics that we're going to be delivering later on. Essentially, ever since people started building houses, they've been knocking them down and messing about with them and making alterations to them. And this has made it an area of interest for quite a long time. So on the screen, you can see an article by Basil Cousins Hardy. He wrote an article for Norfolk Archaeology Journal in 1961, which was titled Some Norfolk Halls. And the very first hall that he mentions in his list of Norfolk halls is for Appleton, and this describes the thing very well, really, about people building halls and knocking them down again. Appleton Hall, or Appleton House, as it was sometimes called, stood on the Sandringham estate. And you can see from the article, it describes a hall that was erected by Sir Edward Paston in 1596, which burned down in 1707. A farmhouse was then built on exactly the same spot, and that was pulled down in 1863. And then the year the farmhouse was pulled down, they built a house for Princess Maud and the Prince of Denmark. And at the time this article was written, that hall was standing, but the hall itself was demolished in 1984. So we've got one site, 3 different buildings, 2 lost halls, strictly, because one of them was a farmhouse. So there's some interesting stuff to do with definitions as well. And this is an image in the photograph there of that last Appleton Hall, the one that was demolished in 1984. And this is a photograph that's in the collection of the Norfolk Record Office. So this is one of the nice things, even though the halls aren't there anymore and you can't go out to see them, because we have the archives, it is possible to see what they looked like in some detail. It's a very, very small photograph, actually, in what is a very large photograph album that contains hundreds of photographs of much, much larger halls. So don't be worried that all the halls have disappeared. We still have some very large halls. And the album belongs to this chap, William, it's a fantastic name, William Amherst Tison Amherst, also known as Baron Amherst. That's how I'm going to refer to him from now on, because it's a lot easier. He was a person that liked halls. He had one of his own. This is Didlington Hall, also in Norfolk. It itself was demolished in 1950. The west wing of this hall dated from the 17th century. It had additions in 1774, 1816 and 1850. But between 1879 and 1886, they remodelled the entire thing, and the result was a mansion, what we'd describe today as a proper stately home. This is a place that, if it was still standing today, people would go and visit. And one of the reasons they would go and visit is part of the building was dedicated to Baron Amherst's Egyptian collection. He was an antiquarian, collected books, also collected Egyptian relics, and he was one of the early patrons for Howard Carter and his expedition that led to the discovery of Tutankhamun. This hall had 12 reception rooms, 46 bedrooms, 5 dressing rooms, 7 bathrooms, and a suite of domestic offices. And this was just part of an estate covering 7,105 acres. On the estate, it included 16 farms, several cottages, a public house, and of course, a water mill. And we know all of these things because it's all listed in the sales catalogue, which obviously is also housed in the Norfolk Record Office. So that's where we can get these lovely interior photos as well as exterior photographs of the hall. This catalogue was produced in 1910, which is the year after Baron Amherst died. Not surprisingly, that the loss of these great halls is a great subject for people to think about and ponder upon, and the stories that led to the loss of these houses is also of great interest to people generally. These are the two most recent books that have been written on the topic. The one in green is written by 3 authors. The last of those authors there is Dr. Sarah Spooner from the University of East Anglia, the Associate Professor in Landscape History and Engagement, and she's working with us to put together our engagement programme. And we're going to be using the theme of lost halls to promote all of the activities that we are doing. Jonathan mentioned the digitising the tithe maps and adding them to complete the layer that already exists. And we're using the theme of the hallmarks to promote work like that. We're going to be helping people right across the county by going out and speaking to them to access archive material, not just archive material that's in the Record Office, but archive material is available to people online that's provided free through the library computers. I'll talk a bit more about that later. There are many houses that have been demolished in Norfolk. There's 88 listed in the Green Book alone. And we're using all of the houses listed in the Green Book to manage the numbers effectively. As I said, at Appleton, there was at least 3 buildings on that site. Each site counts as one Lost Country Hall. So this is the list of the 88 houses that we will be looking at. You can see they are spread across the county, so it doesn't really matter where we go to promote these activities. There's going to be a lost hall nearby where people live. These are halls that have been lost since 1780. I should say that because obviously there were buildings before that and buildings were being knocked down before that as well. And I think passing over to you now, Katie.
Yeah. Right, so hopefully that's sort of whetted your appetite a little bit about the halls themselves. I'm going to be introducing myself. I'm the project manager for the Lost Halls project. As Jonathan mentioned, the Norfolk Record Office was successful in its application to receiving funding from the National Lottery. So now it's been my job to plan the activity, sort of keep everyone on track, hopefully, and making sure we meet our deadlines and outputs, and that, well, the exciting is that we stay within budget, really. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the purpose and the vision of the project and how we're trying to meet the criteria for the Heritage Lottery Fund. The project at its core is looking to protect fragile and at-risk archive material, particularly, as you've heard before, tithe maps and their apportionments, but we do have sound recordings and by conserving and digitising and reducing the handling of those original documents. It's going to be one of the sort of aims of this project. We also will help with the public develop new skills and enable them to research and engage in the Norfolk's lost house history. So whether they're interested in, like, say, the country house aspect or the former estates or the everyday homes that are built within the historic land, or even the people that lived and worked in them, will help them support and develop their research interests. We're looking to develop people's skills and well-being and inclusion through the volunteering and workshops. We're doing community training and heritage-based well-being programs. And we also will sort of round off the project with an exhibition, but with a focus on reaching sort of new and underrepresented audiences across the county. We will look to improve public access to these key resources for research by publishing new accessible data online. And that leads us to sort of modernising and enhancing the digital tools as well. So notably the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer website, so that those historic maps and data can be explored and reused more easily by the public and community groups and other professionals. Right, so now I can go into a bit more detail now about some of the key aspects and sort of outputs of the project. Let me just move that, click that through. You can see that on the screen now as well, hopefully. So one of the key outputs is a big digitisation, like photography program. By digitising the fragile maps and some oral history, such as their Angela Houston sound recordings, we're going to be able to preserve historical data and collections and then enable free access to the public online. This was just an example of a tithe map for people. I think Jonathan did a pretty good explanation, actually, of what a tithe map is. But again, just a nice visual, really. It does give people sort of a sense of, they are all quite different, I suppose. That's the only thing to say, that they're sort of done at different scales with different detail. There is a lot of variety within them, but it's a really valuable insight into sort of historical land use and ownership patterns. So that's the sort of, just to give you another example of a tithe map. And another key aspect and output of what we're delivering as part of the project is volunteers. So they're going to be central to this project, and in a way that we will engage with the public. Inclusivity and flexibility within the programme is built in to a range of offers and ways that the public can volunteer on the Hallmarks project. We're going to be ensuring accessibility volunteers meets our aims of reaching as many different people from as many places as possible by addressing like barriers to participation through various ways, whether it's sort of physical or skills-based. And there's some of the examples of the volunteer opportunities which you can sort of see on the slides. One of them is the tithe apportionment transcription. So accompanying the tithes are apportionments, and I will show you an example of one on my next slide. But we're asking volunteers to work with us to transcribe over 500 records as part of the apportionments. And then when those linked to the tithe maps, they provide sort of a really invaluable insight into land ownership over time. And those will also become, that sort of information will become freely available as a resource on the Norfolk Records Office catalogue as well, as a legacy. We are inviting volunteers to write Hallmarks blogs as well. So it's an opportunity for people to research and produce blogs and develop online skills. With their permission, they'll be published online, exploring topics. And again, it can be quite wide, really, relating to lost house history. So sort of it could be people that lived in the houses or estates, or the changing landscapes, or some local connection that they're interested in. Really, it's just a way of us supporting their interest in the subject matter. We're also working with Picture Norfolk, so there's opportunities to document their archive resource, hoping to uncover newly discovered images connected to lost house history as well as part of that. And then also we've got the oral history collection, which I alluded to earlier, so the Angela Houston sound recordings, but they actually document life within service in Norfolk country houses. So again, there's a nice tie in there. And that on your screen now is an example of what an apportionment looks like. As I said, these are attached to the tithe maps, and they're the details of the land ownership. So the volunteers will either be coming in person to the record office, or they can also volunteer online. We've set it up so that they can volunteer remotely, and we're supporting them to just transcribe these 500,000 records. And then as a legacy, the information will be there in perpetuity for future use. They'll also be linked to the tithe map layer on the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer website, which leads me nicely on to the next slide. So again, I think that as previously sort of alluded to, the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer website is another key part of the project and its redevelopment of this. We're going to be developing a new ArcGIS online map platform, which will be built and will enable members of the public or researchers to interact with geospatial data and historical maps through this publicly accessible website. This is going to be a really good example, we hope, of using technology to democratize heritage access, ensuring that resources are available for free for the members of the public, and so not locked behind paywalls anymore. Digital deliverables also represent sort of a critical component of this project strategy to broaden access and engagement, and it does fit with NCC's, I think, digital transformation strategy as well. So we're working in partnership with other teams at NCC, the Digital Services team and Norfolk Environment Services, to realise this transformation. I'm now going to sort of pass back actually to Andrew, our project officer, who's been developing and is going to be delivering some of more of our community engagement and skills development outputs.
Thank you. So one of the things we're going to be doing is going out into the community, and one of those things we're going to be delivering is a session of 6 workshops called Discovering Lost House Histories. And there's a well-being element that runs through these as well. So these are 6 episode sessions, so it will take place over the course of 6 weeks. The first week, Dr. Sarah Spooner will be with us for each of the sessions. We'll be running sessions in Galston, 2 here at the Record Office, and also in Kings Lynn, so we'll be going to different parts of the county. So Sarah Spooner will be joining us for the first of those sessions, which will be looking at the background to exactly what a country house is, why they were lost, where they were lost. The second of the sessions is going to introduce people to archive maps, where people can view them and how they can be used to indicate when houses were built, when they were demolished, and also on large enough scale maps you can see when changes were made to the footprint of the building as well. The third session is going to be looking at non-map archives. So this is things like UK census entries, birth, death, marriage certificates, parish records, electoral records. That will give us information about the owners of these properties, but also, interestingly, the people that worked in the properties as in domestic service. Also sales particulars, other things like that. The fourth session is looking at the impact of lost country houses, what happened to these sites once the houses had gone. Sometimes the estates remained without the house. Sometimes they were built on, sometimes they were broken up, and various different things happened in the different sites, and we'll be investigating that. What's been the consequence of the loss of these houses for the county? During the fifth session, we're actually going to leave our normal place of meeting and go out to the site of a country house. For convenience, because they have facilities, we're going to go to country houses that are still standing, so places like Somerleyton, Blickling and Oxborough. And again, on those visits, we're going to be accompanied by Dr. Sarah Spooner, who can give us an expert's view of how the grounds around the houses are laid out and the estates associated with them. And the final session in the sixth is a reflective session. So we've got a creative consultant coming in for that, and they're going to work with the participants in these sessions to have a creative output on the previous 5 sessions that the people who've been on the workshops with us, how they reflect. Exactly what those outputs will be is largely up to the participants and the creative consultants. It'll be interesting to see how that works. Like I said, there is a well-being aspect that runs through all of these. So we'll be incorporating the 5 ways to well-being ethos. So as well as telling people where the archives are, we've also got activities for people to get involved with, which will encourage people to connect, be active, take notice, keep learning and give, which are the 5 ways to well-being. For those people that don't want to connect to a 6-week workshop, we're doing 1-day sessions in libraries. All people who are interested in researching either the history of their own house or the history of their families. And we're going into libraries around the county because we have, or everybody in Norfolk has, free access to Find My Past, the British Newspaper Archive and various other archive sources, which ordinarily would set you back several £100 if you had to buy them all yourself. The workshops are going to start with a half-hour talk on archive maps. They're then we'll then go on to describe other non-map archives. And after the end of that half-hour session, people will be provided with a booklet and they can go away and have a look for themselves. But if they wish, they can book on to a one-to-one session with a facilitator, by which I mean me. And they will then be able to go onto 2 of the library computers, which will be just for us to use during those sessions. So people have hands-on experience of going on to the map explorers and the various other free resources and Find My Past and the British Newspaper Archive. So they haven't just heard about these resources, they've actually got practice of using them, because when you hear about them, it's not quite as easy when you try. We've got many of those scheduled already for the first half of the year and bookable computer facilities. And this is all going to culminate, the whole Hallmarks project will culminate in the new year next year with an exhibition at the Archive Centre in the Record Office, which will feature a lot of the material, hopefully lots of new material that would have come out of the project. And potentially, unless it uses glitter, because I don't think the Conservatives are very keen on glitter, some of the things that are produced from the participants in the reflective sessions in the workshops. And now I'm handing over to someone else.
Right, it's back to me just for a brief overview of the outcomes and the impacts that we're aiming for as part of, well, all of this delivery. Can just bring them up on your screen for you. So, expected outcomes and public benefit is obviously very important when you're delivering any project. So, we're aiming for universal digital access. The digitisation of the maps removes barriers for people having to come here and see the physical object, the map in question, enabling free online access to fragile heritage assets, and also even the oral history as well will be able to be accessed online and preserved. Enhanced public access, free online access to digitised heritage resources removes barriers for people, and it supports hopefully as many diverse users, including research and members of the public. Community and engagement and well-being. So the workshops and well-being programme foster learning and confidence, and we're hoping reduce isolation through these heritage activities. We're looking at developing community skills. Volunteers will develop skills and connect through the transcription and blog writing, and enriching heritage knowledge and preservation skills. And also then the social impact as well. So we're hoping the project enhances an understanding of people's local social history, and then fosters that sense of community pride and understanding of their area, and with elements of like intergenerational engagement. So, finally, what's next? So we've been busy. So we've sort of been on the project 3 months now, and have been busy developing the sort of planning and delivery and content. But now we've reached a really exciting point and milestone in the project where we launch the project to the public next week. The volunteer and public events will go live. So I feel like it's actually quite timely that we've been able to come here and share this overview of the Hallmarks project with you. We hope that you would continue to follow the project with interest and help us share and promote the public and volunteer opportunities within the community. Thank you. If there's any questions? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for that presentation. Congratulations on getting the funding. £250,000 is fantastic, and you know, it looks a brilliant project, so we should certainly be promoting that for you and maybe joining it, which would be but I'm not sure I'm one of the underrepresented groups, and that was the first part of my question, if that's okay. So you mentioned obviously inclusion, that's important to the Heritage Fund. So could you just tell us a little bit about who those underrepresented groups are, if you've got any sort of target audiences within that, and maybe where they are? That's the first part of my question. And then second question is just about legacy and sort of what this leaves at the end of the project that people can then engage with. Thank you.
Sure. So underrepresented audiences, we're hoping that people that haven't engaged with the sort of our archival heritage services before, we are setting up quite evaluation, sort of a whole evaluation plan around capturing if people have engaged in anything activity like this before. We are running activities in areas where you wouldn't normally get a lot of engagement, potentially areas of social deprivation, which is hence for the workshops, where there's sort of that more concentrated time. We've got Galston and King's Lynn, and quite a few of our areas where we're going in the libraries are sort of targeted sort of more rurally, socially isolated areas as well, and other areas that are considered, so areas of social deprivation. So even though we could use the Millennium Library, and we might at some point, we are actually going to go to like Mile Cross Library as well, because I think that even though it seems very geographically close, I think we know, people don't necessarily come and visit. You kind of have to meet people where they are. So, and we're working quite closely with the libraries on promoting the opportunities that are like the one-day workshops, because they're actually really embedded in their community. So we've got a lot of good stakeholder partnership working going on. For the workshops also, because we've got the wellbeing aspect, we are partnering with sort of mental health charities as well, and charities like the Restoration Trust and Mind as well, to try and reach people that might need some support through engaging, and that hoping that the sort of heritage element can kind of be a little bit of a stepping stone. Now, what people's motivations for engaging or volunteering is obviously always very broad, isn't it? And we are hoping to capture that and kind of being able to meet people at the stage that they're at and sort of bring them on board through it. So I hope that answers a little bit to that. I mean, and then that sort of leads quite nicely on to legacy. Well, legacy on a project is always something, you have a project and then it sort of comes to an end, doesn't it? And again, it's something that I've done a lot of project work, and it's something that I'm quite mindful of. And again, it's about building things in right at the beginning. So I think the obvious ones are the sort of the digital aspects. So when we've got the maps, the tithe maps digitized, that's there sort of in perpetuity as a resource for people to be able to refer to. And the historic Norfolk Historic Map Explorer website, again, will be a legacy, a big legacy for the project, and that will be available. There'll be loads of layers of different types of map that you can use, that people can see changes through time and use for their research, and some of these for the first time will be available sort of as free access, and so that's going to be an important legacy. I'm trying to think of sort of other aspects of it. I mean, the volunteering aspect is something that we are, when people are onboarding, we're capturing what they want from it. So some people do just want to volunteer for a little while and then be left alone. Other people really do want that long-going thing. So we're working with the team here to think about sort of that ongoing process beyond the project life. They might want to get involved in other aspects of our, like, you know, the exhibition or something like that. And then beyond that, sort of into the core work of the record office. Our approach is very much sort of about developing the relationships with the people and then sort of being responsive to it. I mean, in terms of project legacy, I think I could pass over to you because Jonathan's always developing sort of, you know, part twos and things like that for where we could take things next.
Okay, so I've just scribbled a few things down. With regards to the exhibition, yes, it's a temporary thing, but we always preserve the exhibition in digital form so we can use that as a resource going forward. So we've already got, so when we do an exhibition, we do a lot of digitisation and write copy text, and we'll make sure that we've got that in the bank that we can use. And as Katie said, the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer, I want to change the name because it's a bit of a bit long, but we have to, one of the conditions for the National Lottery, as I know you know, Saul, is for grants of this size, things have to be maintained for 5 years. We want to maintain the website for a lot longer than that. And so we have got money to support it for 5 years, but it will keep going. One of the things that, and it has been mentioned, we're working with the Environment Service, colleagues in the Norfolk Historic Environment Record. They've got the skills with GIS, Geographical Information System mapping. And so there was, you know, it was mainly us and them that use the Norfolk Historic Map Explorer. We've both got resources on it. And we really wanted to sort of create, we have to modernise it, and in doing so we're creating a platform that we can use for other things. So I've already got an idea of what other layers I want to put on there. I'll have to get the funding to do it, but it can become an amazing resource, more so than it is at the minute. And you know, we can put all sorts of different resources on there. Anything that has a geographical aspect to it, we can put it on there. So it's sort of been moribund for quite a long time. I want this project will bring it back up. Other things, the blogs stay there, so that's a legacy. And we have a lot of people that just keep coming on. It's become quite a big thing. And the other thing I scribbled down is the oral history recordings. They're on mini discs, and I don't know if anyone remembers mini discs. I hate them. I hate them with a passion. Along with digital audio tape, it's if you're going to create something that's really bad to preserve, you create mini discs. So I want to get the recordings. We've not really listened to them in detail, but it was a member of the Costume and Textile Association. She went and interviewed people about the clothes that they wore as part of their work. And they all seem to be people that worked in service. So I'm hoping that we get an insight into that world. So we will get the data off the mini disc and we will preserve that forever. So that's my list of things.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. First of all, thank you for the presentation and thank you for an excellent construct around the project, and also thank you to Councillor Eagle and Councillor James for coming up with the idea and then seeing you act on it. So it's great collaboration, and we have such a rich history in Norfolk, and so it's really important that we celebrate and preserve it as best we can. So I really like the project structure. What I would say is I really am interested about those kind of records where we see the people in service, and we we also hear about the audio tapes or the old mini discs. You know, I'll give you my old player if you need it. It's in the back of the cupboard somewhere. But because I think what we've done well in the museum service with Gresson Hall is that we've captured a lot of social deprivation in the way that that transpires with its workhouse history, and then that's presented in a very kind of interactive and you know, a way that you can relate to it. So I think that having voices and things of like that nature, I think it is an important aspect. I would also just say that what we're talking about is houses that have disappeared, buildings that are gone, and so you know there is a wider kind of danger that we have historical buildings that are always at threat, under threat. Trouse, the old pumping mill down at Trouse has just been sort of protected and suffered arson recently, not as old as some of the other buildings. So I think some part of the legacy of coming out of this is about the vulnerability of historical buildings in their upkeep, and that we kind of are helping to promote the vulnerability. Maybe the Norwich Society is someone to kind of talk to in terms of the work that they've done to try and preserve things around the city. But my main point, and briefly, is that somebody who has volunteered for the National Trust and is a professional gardener and has worked at Blickling Hall Gardens, you know, in the past, and you know, for my ND studied historical gardens. This is very interesting to see the preservation of the buildings, etc., and what was contained within it, and the characters and the people involved. But also historical gardens. They have a really important part. There's different famous gardeners that will have designed them. Different plants. There was a whole swathe of plants being brought over from different parts of the world. Also, again, the garden element on terms of people's well-being and peace. And then those outbuildings, you know, where the little shed where the gardener sat, the first greenhouses and stuff. Blickling has managed to preserve a lot of that, and actually, you know, when you're looking at some of these lost properties, you know, in some of those records and in the footprints, you know, trying to tell the story of the outside of the building is also a really important element. So those are my contributions. Thank you.
And just to say that is an important part that is of what Andrew's going to be delivering as well. We do look at the biodiversity and the kind of the landscapes that they were often built. They were made to look like natural landscapes, weren't they? But they were created. So yeah, I think I can let you speak to that.
Yeah, there's a few things in what you said. The first thing you were talking about, like the work at Gresson Hall. I think we have to appreciate that the vast majority of people at the time these halls were standing were working in them rather than owning them. And so that is a key interest point for me. And certainly during the workshops, we will be looking at the people who are serving in the houses to work out where the rest of their families were, because some of the people in service were married with children and their children were not with them. So that is certainly something that's interesting. We will be looking at that. I am also interested in this idea of vulnerability in the buildings, but also conscious of the fact that change is something that happens as well. And some of these buildings were lost because people wanted to build bigger and even more impressive buildings that we now wouldn't want to lose. So it's very complex, and it's also really interesting, and that's something I want to work through in the workshops. And what you were saying about the landscapes, that we will be talking about the development of the estates more widely, but also the landscapes. Unfortunately, the hall that did stand here isn't part of the project because it was a villa, didn't have an estate attached to it. But Humphrey Repton was involved in designing these grounds, and indeed there's some fantastic snobbery about planting a hedge line just at the front there, so when you were in Brackendale Hall you couldn't see the habitations of other men, and by that we mean people living in Trouse. So.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what a fantastic project, and it's going to be interesting to hear how this progresses. Could you tell us how you're planning, how far and wide you're planning to advertise the workshops? And could I ask that you make sure to include in communications about the workshops particularly the borough and district councils, as we, certainly at King's Lynn, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out to all the parishes. So it would be very useful to hear on that. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, this relates a little bit to, I think it was Ben's question at the beginning about, or maybe it was Saul's, about underrepresented groups. Because it's one thing identifying underrepresented groups, but the communicating with them is the real trick. And that's one of the benefits of going to the local libraries, because the local libraries know their communities very well. And so when I've been phoning around the libraries, there's two things we're going to be doing. One, we will be sending, you don't post posters anymore. You email posters, they print them out and they put them up. If there are groups that they know meet there anyway, they're going to be talking to them about it. And also on their Facebook groups, when we will be posting the events as they come up on our Facebook, and each individual library with their Facebook or other social media apps are available, we'll be sharing on them also. I'm aware of the King's Lynn, it has its own special archive. Ideally, we would have used that facility, but we'll be using the brand new King's Lynn Library, which we're very excited about seeing. Apparently open very soon, 16th of March.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Gary and Jonathan, first of all, for indulging Councillor James and myself. And I'm sorry she can't be here today. She's still recovering from surgery. But we had an idea which was just to show I do have an interest outside of politics. And it has always been those lost houses and the stories that were told of people, of where they were, those ruins. And you were fascinated, why is this strange tree in an area or a walled garden, so such as Didlington, that sits within my division. There's two fantastic walled gardens still there. One's a garden centre, one's unfortunately neglected, but there is still the mock castle on the island and other areas. But that's been an interest of mine, and it's one of the pleasures of actually coming here and being able to nip into the record office and find out more information about those bits, and the EMAP Explorer to go in and see actually where that parkland has been disappeared and how much we've lost of an environment. And to add to that point, the Wendling Beck project, which is a big bit about restoring landscape just south of Dereham, they are actually using those maps. Although Gresson Hall has gone, they are actually going to recreate the parkland and using maps and those aerial photographs to actually try and put the original species of trees in that area and return that back. But you think it was an interest, and it's one of those advantages of social media these days. Suddenly you share and you find there's a lot more people involved. And it was actually when you put old photos and the odd postcard that I've got myself of a house, suddenly you had so much more engagement. And as a local councillor representative like all of us, it was a new way of engaging with your residents, and they were interested. Oh, where was my house? And suddenly someone would say, the house owner changed. Well, no, that was the old gamekeeper's place. That was how it was known. And it's brought in, and I've took the advantage last night, soft launch, a little bit of the parish council of mine, and it was instantly, someone said, oh, there's a lady, she's in her 90s, she would remember Didlington. And I said, this is what we want to hear, her memories of that. And we've also got the memories now of those houses being demolished. So my house had two of the doors, probably only, I shouldn't say only, but out of the servants, they weren't the grand doors in the main bit, but they were there because my house was built at the time of that being demolished. There was a shortage of building materials, and you see a lot of people, and it gives that chance of becoming engaged. So I'm going to take advantage, and even just coincidentally the week before, someone asked me because of some pictures. I said, oh, well, I want a hobby, or I'm interested. How can I get out community? Could you help me? And I said, well, actually, this is now going to happen. So even with our own areas, we're going to form a little community group. And if you look where my division is, there seems to be a plethora of demolished houses. Some are in the battle area, and if you ever watch Dad's Army, you can see some of that historic landscape is used for their scenery. So I think we can do a lot for people's well-being, bring new community groups. You know, we normally go sporting, not everyone is there on that point. We can bring them in and encourage us. the voices and what's spoken already is different aspects, but we can all bring that together under one focus group and give that attention and interest. And perhaps some people who do feel a little bit isolated, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the city or anything, we can actually give them a chance to have a voice. And while we've got this opportunity, and I'm pretty certain, reading some books from across the country, there's probably some people now in perhaps their 80s or 70s, when they were younger, were sneaking around and perhaps in these deserted houses which were neglected and left, wandering around, and perhaps they've got their own memories of saying what that place was like and whether they thought it was the bogeyman and scaring each other. But we have those, and they're probably scrumping to keep. Okay. But we've got the opportunity now. They probably feel safe to share those stories, and those stories are of enormous interest to us socially as well. So I think there's a full opportunity, very grateful, and I think it's refreshing that outside of a political party, as a councillor, and I went as a councillor to that point and suggested an idea and said, look how much interest I get. There's the books nationally that Gary and Jonathan said, yes, we can do with this. And then they said, actually, we think we can get a grant out of the National Heritage Lottery Fund to receive that money. Was outstanding. And I think, you know, it's credit to them. I think they will gain a lot of new information, perhaps obscure photographs. Someone took one of those places, Didlington had a content sale. If you go onto Pathé News, you can see someone carrying a bath out of the main doors of Didlington All Prior. And there's probably someone got pictures there with, well, personally, from a personal interest, it is, you know, one of those highlights for me to be here as a councillor and say, oh, look what I've got as an interest. And I think it goes across all of us, whether we're whatever political party as a county council, but district, and it gives us that new opportunity to engage with our residents where perhaps we don't normally get that opportunity and foster new relations. So I'm very grateful, thank you, and I would pass on Councillor James's thanks, and obviously we'll be attending and enjoying what's coming forward.
Thank you. Well, I think it's a fantastic project, so congratulations to you all. And I have two questions. One is, regarding legacy particularly, is what's being done to take this into schools? Because I can see it has enormous potential, you know, not least attracting children by what it was like in service, and helping them to really to feel what the past was like, you know, simply as opposed to just reading about it in books or on their laptops. And the second question is a wider one, which is, this is such an interesting project. It ought really to have national attention, I feel. And clearly the question of lost country houses is a very pressing one in other parts of England. And the second question is what's being done to put it onto a wider national or even international scale and get a bit of attention throughout the country and not just in Norfolk, where clearly it is of huge interest already. I think it's obviously of potentially considerably even greater importance. Thank you.
I'm going to start with your second question and then I'll do the first one. So, Councillor Eagle brought my attention to a famous exhibition that was done at the V&A. Yeah. So there has been, and it was one of the more, it's quite famous, that exhibition. They had a soundtrack of a hall actually being demolished, so you could go around. So I am aware that there's other pockets of this similar in different parts of the country. So we'd obviously shout about what we're doing, and hopefully other areas might pick up on it. And I think, I'm not aware that Suffolk have done much, but there are a lot of lost country houses there as well. With regards schools, it may well be something that develops on the back of this, and we're hoping that will happen. One thing that we found, and that the National Lottery do warn you about, is working with schools, and they just don't have capacity. You know, you build up all these plans with schools and then it just falls through because they haven't got the capacity. So it's much more, I'm hoping that by shouting about it and we do message schools, that something organically will come out of it that we can then develop. Because you're right, there's lots of things with the national curriculum that you could, that are relevant crossover.
If I just come back, absolutely right. It was called The Destruction of the English Country House. I've actually got the book, which is referred to as the Bible, there. And I actually dragged my children and convinced them that it was a nice day out in London when they did the 40th anniversary in 2014, might have been there, and they had it reflected, and they had like giant bricks rubble with the pictures coming up, and it was fascinating, and it has a global, and if anyone, there's numerous websites devoted to lost country houses, and there is several sites on social media posts as well. So it will, I feel, attract that more national interest and take it on. And I think we'll get a lot, and we will just say from that destruction, Save Britain's Heritage, that national charity was formed from that, from those Marcus Beanie, Sir Roy Strong, John Harris, who's wrote a book of doing exactly that, snooping around country houses and sales. So I think we have got a chance to push out, but it will come out to that promotion. And we mustn't forget that there was the house, the estate, but they own probably all those houses in the village. Someone then realises who lived in that house and give those people that opportunity and that connection and that further history. So, yeah, I am there and think it's very, very, well, I think it's got a lot of opportunity, and I'm going to really enjoy getting into that. And you're going to find out so much more people, just those little memories and stirring. So, and unfortunately, with such that massive number gone, nearly every member here should have that opportunity of engagement. And if you've only got to, there's some iconic shares which are shared nationally. So Beaupre Hall, just right out in the west, and Country Life, their images, they've actually got it. It was an old Tudor mansion, and they've got this row of modern bungalows going into the avenue, and then there's just the dilapidated remains of that house as they've, you know, the 1960s iconic look. So there is such there, and like, as I said, those, and I'm now extremely jealous that you were able to attend that, because I think it's an iconic measurement on that point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a really, really fascinating project, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with it. Partly carrying on from what Fabian has just mentioned about the other houses that were part of an estate as well. I'm particularly interested in the Kimberley estate, because our house used to be part of the Kimberley estate and had to be, it was sold away from the estate because one of the previous earls had some very expensive habits. And I think I do have a catalogue actually of the sale when all the houses around the Kimberley estate were sold. So I really think I need to give that to you at some point. But it is fascinating to think, you know, what happened in our house, who lived in there when it was part of the Kimberley estate. We have some rumours and gossip about what it might have been used for. But so I presume that's going to be part of the project, to look at the wider estates and where they had to be split up. And also I see on there it says Kimberley Old Hall, so there is a Kimberley Hall that stands there, so there must have been a previous hall, I guess. But it's interesting also to understand how current halls that still exist now, how they've managed to survive, and what they've had to do in order to survive, whether it's becoming a wedding venue or, you know, whatever diversifications they've had to do, or the National Trust has taken them on. But my main point is I noticed on your report that this project has an end date of September next year. And from all the conversations that have been raised and the questions, it seems like this project has got legs and it could run and run and run. So do you have an idea that perhaps you could apply for more funding past the end date to find, you know, more information to add into this? Because I think, you know, it's only 18 months away, and you've got an awful lot. There's 88 properties listed on your map. It seems to be a huge project that, and you'll find different avenues you want to go down as you go along. So, yeah, do you think perhaps September 2027 won't be the end of the project and you could go on further?
Well, yeah, having the point about, you know, we could do lots more. Jonathan made the point earlier about this is a sort of starting base for lots and lots of things. So I think all I can say at this stage is we're something we're thinking about. Whilst I'm speaking, also to address the point about sort of national profile for the project. I think the main thing we need to do at this stage is deliver a superb project, because excellence is the way to do it, and I feel reasonably confident.
Yeah, that is me speaking. That's good. I thought that was someone else for a moment. Yeah, first of all, if you do have the sales catalogue, I'm sure the archivists would be very interested in seeing it. And yes, it is Kimberley Old Hall. Yes, there was another hall there. We will also be using Witton Hall, which is near North Walsham, which was owned by the Woodhouses as well, as one of our case studies, because we've got lots of records associated with that. And the remnants of these halls, the ice houses, the laundries, the other buildings, we've mentioned that the gardens, some of these estates now exist just as a kitchen garden surrounded by a large estate. They will definitely form part of the project because they are of interest to people who might not be interested in houses but are interested in the history of gardens. And some of the halls that still exist and are called halls are actually the servants' quarters of the old hall that's been demolished, but the servants' quarters have remained. And you mentioned wedding venues. Congham Hall near King's Lynn is a good example of that. The hall burned down. You can have your wedding now at Congham Hall, but what you're actually doing is having your wedding at in the servants' quarters, because the hall is not there anymore. So we will be looking at that.
And I think the one-day library workshops that Andrew's going to be delivering specifically will be looking at helping people trace their own house history. So we put it under the umbrella of the lost house, like the lost country houses. But like you say, people might be living in a house on the estate or just want to know, but it's the same process, whether your house sits on a previous estate or not. We are giving people the skills themselves and showing them the resources that are available to them to kind of start that journey of discovery themselves. So yes, they'll attend like the presentation and some, I don't know, can book some one-to-one sessions just to get started. But our hope is that then people can kind of take it as far as they want, really, and into researching their own houses. It's the same census records, it's the same resources that apply. So that is something that we're hoping will be one of the big outputs of the project.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, the expertise for schools engagement already sits with the museum service, and most of our regional or county museums have learning officers, and they provide course material that ties in with the national curriculum. So if the target is school children, talk to the museum service. Thank you.
And we do have our education outreach and wellbeing team do work with schools, so we have some expertise as well. Yeah. Of course, I mean, lots of school trips going out on. So there's a new attraction in Norwich, isn't there? Which lots of people go to.
Just a final point, Mr. Chairman. Just on that school's point, actually, they obviously appreciate if you're able to go in and run a workshop, particularly primary schools. But also, of course, they're an excellent conduit out to the community. So I wonder whether some of those library sessions, for example, could be promoted through schools and all the relationships they have with parents and carers, and that might be advantageous.
I think that's a really good point, and I was also sort of thinking about what Suzanne said as well. If there are ways of reaching people that you can think of as, you know, like the newsletters, and when they go out, that is something we've got, like obviously a comms plan we can add to it. I'm seeing it as obviously we've got a big push around launch, but we are having like sustained sort of communications plan throughout the life cycle of the project, and we can pace it. And I think at the moment, you know, as I say, we'll know there'll be information and content generation throughout this project, and we'll see another big push again towards the end of the project, especially when we launch the exhibition next year. I feel like that we'll know a lot more about what we found and the people that have engaged with the program as well. So, but yeah, if there's ways of reaching people as well, that, you know, as well as you going out and speaking to people, but please, yeah, do let us know, and we can add that to our comms plan.
Chair, could I just add, voluntary Norfolk as well? Are you engaged with those ones?
Yes, we are. Yeah, and we're going to be on there.
They've got a great website.
Having a and I've got I'm going to be on their newsletter that goes out. We're having a section on their e-bulletin as well that goes out to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Could I just ask that you also include the committee members here in the notices that go out? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. In all these wonderful estates, houses, old buildings, there's a lot of heraldry. Now, you can imagine when Appleton Hall was built, rebuilt for Maud and the Oldenburgs, the Danish Oldenburgs, the heraldry in that house would be splendid. It'd be on the lintel, on the door, the drive, everything. I would like to see a bit of heraldry in this, because heraldry you can read a lot. The families, who they were, who they married, depending on if they're impaling their arms, etc. There's a lot to read about history in heraldry and the history going back. But it would be nice to see it on, because remember our old charters we've got here in the Record Office, they have the seal. If you can't read it, which I probably couldn't read, you can actually know who the families are because of the heraldry. Because all these wonderful houses had beautiful heraldic achievements on everything in the furnishing. Do we have photographs of those? Because when they're pulling down, you're getting rid of a lot of.
We do have some. But the thing that struck me there, Michael, is that would be a good subject for a blog. It would be a good subject for a blog, Michael.
Just to add on just to prove that I'm really sad and know far too much of the stuff I don't really want. When we're talking Princess Maud and Prince Carl of Denmark, he became the King of Norway. So Appleton House is the site of the last monarch to be born in Norfolk, because that was then became King Olaf of Norway, the preceding monarch now, or the father of the current.
Does that mean that Trump's going to invade us in Norfolk?
I think we're safe from the Vikings now. We've reconquered Norway. We're safe. We've got our own back.
Didlington, you've got, you say Thyssen Amherst. Thyssen. Well, Thyssen's got their own, I think it's a German barony. But then also Amherst was an English baron, Lord Amherst of Hackney. And the heraldry there must have been superb. It would be nice to see it actually on the...
Like Jonathan says, it's ripe for a blog, and we do have images taken from halls that are now demolished just of the heraldry. And we've got a fantastic, lots of people will know the Walter Rye book, and he's got some fantastic comments about heraldry and the accuracy of it. So that would be an interesting subject for someone to investigate and write about. And certainly if anyone came to me and was interested in that, we'd help them out with that.
Well, actually, the Norfolk Record Office always, I'd like to plug it, but we already have a very successful blog site, which I encourage everybody to follow. And we have a long history of volunteers writing blogs and putting them on. So this is going to bolster that even more.
at 10 a.m. if we're still in existence. Yeah. That's not so far. Well. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And thank you, Chair. Thank you for your chairing and helping it make this a great meeting and
No,
exploring all these subjects on behalf of the
not
people.
me.
It's
You
an
make the
absolute
meeting.
brilliant. It's brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
And Martin, have you had a look around the office? If you want to make an appointment with, guess who? Yeah.
Give me drop me an email and I can give you a tour around anytime you like.
That'll be very kind. Thank you very much. I'll take you up on that.
Well, yeah, thank you all very much. And